Last entry I finally had something that resembled a game. So naturally, I decided to double the amount of work, adding 2 entirely new classes, and also somehow breaking absolutely everything. For years I've started game projects that never went anywhere. After dozens of abandoned projects, I'm building my first multiplayer game from scratch as a solo developer. And this time, I'm determined to see it through. I'll be documenting every step of the journey, as I try to finally make it all the way to release. Let's talk about class design. I usually have kind of a rough fantasy for each class before I touch any code at all, but I've learnt over the years that waiting for the perfect idea just means that nothing ever gets made, so I tend to pick a random direction and just start building. First up is the second playable character, the Power Mage. I want the Power Mage to be an artificer of sorts, using technology to create powerful weapons that harness energy. To get started, the initial idea I have for the moveset is as follows. Primary ability shoots a basic projectile. The secondary ability spawns a power gate. The power gate is a static gate that will increase the size, speed, and damage of any projectile shot through it. And for the ultimate ability, a power beam. The player will freeze in place and shoot a beam directly out of their centre, doing huge damage to anyone in its path, and also destroying any projectiles that collide with it. I started off with the most important part of the new character, the model. I made an entirely new character model for the Power Mage. It's a hat. I just added a hat. Now I can visually differentiate between the characters without having to create an entirely new animator. I then set up my character data for the Power Mage, using the default abilities, to see if we could swap the classes correctly. That all came together very quickly. What a great system. Though I have realised I need a way to actively swap the weapons for each class, as previously I had the same weapon object for all classes, as they were only test classes. Now I need to make them swap depending on which weapons a character should have. I implemented a simple setup for each character's weapons, and then got back to work on my second ability for the Power Mage, the Power Gate. The Power Gate will spawn at the player's cursor location, within a certain range, and any projectiles shot through the Power Gate get amplified, increasing their damage and speed. I had it all working, and then a thought struck me. What if they stacked?
Oh no!
Maybe I should add a limit. Lastly, I moved on to the ultimate, the Power Beam. I had the start of the beam pretty quickly. It's just an object that's drawn between 2 points, but it follows my mouse cursor. While I was implementing this, I finally figured out why my players weren't dying sometimes. Turns out I was calculating their new health before setting it to 0, so sometimes it anticipated less than 0 health, then set it to 0 after checking if the player should be dead.
Oops.
I did want my beam to always travel the max distance out to the cursor, but I realised it was a lot more complicated than I had originally anticipated. So for now, I'm sticking to the cursor as a feature, not a bug. With the Power Mage out of the way, it was time to start looking at another class. So this one's going to be a Lancer. Again, I find just starting to be the most effective path for development, so I started with these basic notes and just got to it. First thing I did was make an entirely new character model for the Lancer character. It's just a hat. I added another hat. Then I started working on the primary ability. The Lancer will swing his lance and shoot out a wave projectile that increases in size once spawned. Pretty simple stuff. I then added the secondary ability, which was a little bit more complicated. It spawns a shield at the player's cursor location, and every time a projectile hits it, it's destroyed, and the shield loses 1 charge. With those finished, I tried to boot up the game, and none of my players could connect and the server was completely broken. Having fixed the server issues, I then moved on to my ultimate ability. So I have a lot of different ideas for this ultimate, and I couldn't really make a decision on what it should be. Initially I thought about having the Lancer be more of like a melee character, charging about and pinning people to the walls. Maybe having the ultimate being some sort of thrown projectile that skewered the players and then pinned them to the wall if hit, but that didn't feel quite right. Maybe a bit too strong? Then I thought about having the Lancer spawn a big shield and absorb all of the damage in that area for a set period of time. Not quite right. Then I thought about making it a 1v1 type situation, where the Lancer would target a player and isolate them in a duel to the death. But none of these were really hitting. But then...
Could black holes be the key to a quantum theory of gravity, a deeper theory of how reality, of how space and time works?
What if I combine some of these elements and create a black hole ability that sucks in all of the nearby projectiles, and combines it with the shield ability, destroying all of the projectiles? That does sound cool, but how can I make it even cooler? What about each time a projectile is destroyed, the energy from the projectile is stored on the player, and then they are able to redirect that shot back out at the target? And with that I was settled on it. Now I had this really cool idea and I was excited to see if I could actually make it a reality. So good so far. I had projectiles being absorbed, so now it's time to shoot them back at...
You didn't see anything.
The Lancer's shield's now correctly absorbing all of the bullets during the set period, but now I want to make it so my Lancer gets rooted in place as well, as it felt a little bit too strong having them being able to run around while absorbing all projectiles. By the end of the day, I had a working ultimate ability that I was finally happy with. While it was really cool and it did work correctly, I felt that it was a bit weird not having a visual indicator for how charged up the Lancer was. So I made a particle system using Unity's particle system. The particle system starts when you press the ability, and for each bullet you absorb it gives more particles to the system, allowing other players to have some visual representation of how many bullets are coming their way.
Help!
There's still a lot of bugs, but I'm leaving it here for now. I'll come back and I'll clean up some of those remaining issues later. So I continued work on my particle system. I wanted it to feel more like it was being charged up, absorbing the bullets ready to fire them back at the enemy, which I think now looks a little bit better. Now that I have some more playable classes in, I need some way to test them. So I created some target dummies within the play areas, so I could test all of the abilities without having to boot up a second client every time. While adding this, I found some interesting interactions between my classes. And this was kind of the last straw, so I decided it was time to clear out the bugs.
Final round.
With everything fixed, it's time to start looking at some other elements for the game. I definitely want pick-up items in the game, drawing inspiration from games like Quake, things like health packs to heal the player and power-ups like shields or armors. I started with health packs as that seemed the easiest, and I was right, that is pretty easy to implement. Maybe I'm finally getting a hang of this whole RPC deal.
Or maybe this is just foreshadowing.
I then moved on to the shield power-up that absorbs bullets. Again, this was relatively quick. I made the shield and it was spawning incorrectly, but each time I was playing I was getting 30 plus shields on pickup. I tried to debug this for a very long time. Eventually I did find the cause, I just hadn't set a respawn timer at all, so it was just respawning instantly.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
While figuring this out, I also learnt of a better way to send information between my clients, the humble target RPC. A target RPC is just a way of sending a message to one specific client instead of publishing it out to every client. I've been checking out some other indie game trailers recently to try and draw some inspiration and kind of see what direction I should be going mine as well, and I saw that one of them had a camera zoom on player death, and I thought it was really cool, so I stole the idea. I now have 3 playable classes, some pickups and a way for players to heal, and for the very first time, absolutely no bugs at all. Honestly, the game is in a pretty playable state, and I think I'm getting close to being able to share it with my community for a kind of super early playtest. So I think it's about time we did some map renovations. Next entry I'll be taking a look at map design, lighting, and maybe some map mechanics, and maybe adding a cheeky trap or two. This game is ultimately being built so I can play it with my friends and my community, so if you'd like to be a part of that journey, come and join us on Discord. I'll be sharing progress updates, discussing ideas, and eventually running playtests as development continues. There is a link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next update.